On today's episode of the Black Studies Podcast, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Kinitra Brooks, Associate Chair of Graduate Studies in the Audrey and John Leslie Endowed Chair in Literary Studies in the Department of English at Michigan State University. Dr. Brooks specializes in the study of Black women, genre fiction, and popular culture, as seen in her weekly column for The Root, The Safe Negro Guide to Lovecraft Country, and her multiple visits as a commentator on NPR's 1A. She has co-edited The Lemonade Reader, an interdisciplinary collection that explores the nuances of Beyonce's 2016 audiovisual project Lemonade. She has recently co-edited The Renaissance Reader, which is also based on a Beyoncé project. Her two other books are Searching for Sycorax, Black Women's Hauntings of Contemporary Horror, a critical treatment of Black women in science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and Sycorax's Daughters, an edited volume of short horror fiction written by Black women. Her current research focuses on portrayals of the conjure woman throughout history and in contemporary popular culture as seen in her forthcoming graphic novel, Red Dirt Witch. Dr. Brooks recently served as the Advancing Equity Through Research Fellow at the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research at Harvard University during the 2018-2019 academic year. Dr. Brooks also served as the Visiting Associate Professor of Women's Studies and African American Religions in the Women's Studies in Religion program at Harvard Divinity School for the 2022-2023 academic year. Dr. Brooks' current book project, Divine Conjurers, Rootwork, Resistance, and Revolution, explores the unique relationship between Black women's political subversion and Black women's spirit work. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Black Studies Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Kinitra Brooks, Associate Chair of Graduate Studies, and the Audrey and John Leslie Endowed Chair in Literary Studies in the Department of English at Michigan State University. Hello, Dr. Brooks. How are you doing today?
Hello. Hi. It's so lovely to be here. Very exciting.
It's so great to have you here. Thank you so much. So we'll dive in. How did you get into Black Studies as a field, and what keeps you committed to doing the work of Black Studies?
I don't think I was never not in Black Studies. I've always been fascinated by Black women, who we are, what we do, how we're so integral to everything, but also the invisibility of a lot of our work. Also, I grew up in New Orleans, born and raised, and so it's a very Black city. Well, it used to be, gentrification. But, everyone was Black. The mayor was Black, the people in City Hall. And, my parents were civil servants. My dad worked at City Hall. My mom was a elementary school teacher and then a principal. So I was heavily involved and surrounded by Blackness my entire growing up. But also simultaneously, I was noted as gifted and picked up from the quote unquote urban school that I was in and brought to the nice white, well-funded school. And so I was always very intelligent, and I knew I wanted to talk about and work with and study Black people because that's who my family is. And even my current work focuses on my family, focuses on Louisiana, focuses on the histories and the peoples that created me. And I like to talk about and say, I like to say I owe a debt, right? And I am the granddaughter and great-granddaughter of domestics, Southern domestics. And so, clean white folks toilet for me to be here. And I owe a debt to tell their stories, to honor them, to speak their names, and to do the work that honors my family and my ancestors.
Thank you. I think that the importance of the debt, the past part, the connection to the past in Black Studies is something that is always there, but not necessarily pointed out as much, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah. I gave a reading of, like, my comic book, work because I have a graphic novel coming out. Um, Red Dirt Witch, which is an adaptation of N.K. Jemisin's, short story. And I read the work, and people didn't get it. And, it was a, mostly non-Black audience. And one of the young women, she was Black, and she came up and she was like, "Well, I really enjoyed your work, Dr. Brooks." And I said, "Thank you, but I'm not doing this for them." Like, this is not, and sometimes your work, people are excited about it. Sometimes it doesn't hit, and that's absolutely okay. But, this isn't about doing work that makes people like me or, all of these things. This is about the work I am doing that's larger than myself.
thank you. So there, you talked a little bit before we started the recording about how, like, you kind of dabble in what you want to and what you need to, and you've been all over the place, which I will say, like, doing the podcast has been very helpful for me in that I always felt like I was all over the place, and then I started talking to other people, and it was like, "No, this is just Black studies." Like, you gotta pull in a little bit of whatever is necessary to address this issue or answer this question or explore this path. So how do you situate yourself in relationship to disciplines, especially as someone who was trained in a particular way?
Mhm. Yeah, it's really weird, but my PhD is in comparative literature, which is a very classic sort of degree. And I did that on purpose because I knew I wanted to study very non-classic things, right? And, it was purposeful because I knew that, I can always say I can go toe to toe with you on Kant, on Foucault, on all of these things, but that's not where I want to be, right? And I think, now subsequent folks can, take more disciplines, and there's a lot more flexibility in the disciplines and all those things. But that wasn't there. In comparative literature, which was cultural studies before cultural studies, you were able to look at different types of text. It included film, all of these things, which shows a little bit about my age. um, but it allowed me this sort of flexibility in considering so many things as text in my early work that I was able to intertwine it with what I actually wanted to do, which is study Black women and study Black horror, right? I'm a horror scholar, so I confuse a lot of people. And what I like to do is I call it puttering. I like to sort of putter and look a little bit over here and look a little bit over there as things start to come together and, braid together for me. And I don't listen or pay attention to this is history, this is literature, this is, film, this is cultural studies, or, you know, it's about what interests me.
Mm.
And for me, what interests me is in showing that Black women are everywhere. And I like to say that everyone thinks they know who Black women are. And because they are so wrong, we are thus illegible to them. They can't read us, right? And it's not that I want to, expose or open up Black women to this reading, because I think some things we do need to stay secret, right? I work a lot on my family, and um talking to my mom, and my mom like took me aside, and she's like, "I love the work you do. This is so amazing. You're talking about, my mother, my grandmother, all these things." But she was like, "Not every story needs to be told." Right? And so I'm particularly in looking at conjure, Black women's spiritual practices, all of these things, it's holding in tension my fascination and saying these Black women are doing fascinating things while also respecting who they were, while also respecting how they saw themselves. Like I talked about my grandmother, my great grandmother, Myrtle Anderson, as a conjure woman. But she didn't refer to herself as such, right? She saw herself as a Christian woman who did healing and herb work and all of these things. She didn't describe herself that way. So I had to be very careful in talking about her to respect who she thought she was while also um developing and constructing who I read her as and realizing there are gaps there. Did I really answer your question?
Yeah, no, you did. And I think that there are several important and interesting to me points that you made with regards to thinking about one, not only the fact that Black women are everywhere, but that we are illegible
Mhm.
largely, but also that some things need to stay secret.
Yeah,
And I think that particularly in the age of social media, so many things are no longer secret that should be secret. Um, and that leads to a ton of misinterpretation and assumption about things that can cause more problems than are necessary. Um,
absolutely. And I think in saying things in mixed company, I think and here's the thing. I understand the hunger for wanting to expand beyond and since I talk about spirituality and all that, I want to expand beyond um the Black Christian church, right? As it stands, as it has stood, etc. I actually identify as Christian plus, so I'm Christian and I do, extra. I'm like I come along with a little extra. Um, and I understand that hunger for knowledge, but the knowledge that you need isn't going to be found on social media.
yeah.
Um, African traditions are apprentice traditions. You train under someone. It's face to face, right? Once you've established those connections, then you can do things sort of over that. But I understand the hunger, but there also must be not just respect, a reason why, because we have hush harbors and our business not supposed to be up there like that. And a lot of times people are like, oh, you want to do secrets? You want to do. Yes, we need secrets as a people, right? Our secrets kept us alive. And so I think we need to explore, and I think we should always have conversations because what I think should stay silent is, that's another conversation. But I do think we need to agree that some things need to stay in community. Some things need to stay off of social media. Some things need to happen face to face, or hell, at least in the group chat, right? or or on the FaceTime or something like that. And if you're going to pick up your phone and be on camera, do that with the one or two people that are in your group or what have you, and have these conversations. But the way certain conversations are being had, I just think it's not only is it non-strategic, unintelligent, um, but it undercuts us. And it undercuts the richness of, and also because those people who are properly trained are not going to tell you everything. They can't,
Yeah.
right? A lot of things are closed traditions. There are some things you could do on the edges, right? And I think that some of that's being told. Um, but also people are vetted. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people in searching for these larger and expanded ideas of spirituality, of divinity, etc., um, get caught up and get scammed, unfortunately, right? Because that vulnerability, in some ways, makes you a mark, right? And so I think people can and should have this hunger and this curiosity about things. But I think things are meant to go about in a certain way that protects all involved. And I also like to say that, you know, to fellow Christians, like, you've been taught that your ancestors are demonic, which I find fascinating. But also, um, do you know the growing population in traditional African religious practices? It's white people. They've convinced you that you're they're taking away your power and now getting access to your ashe and your power. You know, who's winning here? And certain these things were hush harpers. They were things that took place under the auspices of intracommunal conversations, right?
Mhm.
Intracommunal ways of knowledge. And I'm fascinated by Black women's ways of knowing. Um by possession, by how we pass down information, by our altars, by all these things, because I truly believe and have experienced myself that communication is happening constantly across the veil of death. And you can't really write a citation about that, right? Oh, I
Mm.
got an evidencia, right? All of my book projects come from my maternal ancestors. They visit me in a dream and they're like, this is what your new book gonna be about. Boom, bam, boom, right? And I'm just like, thought, like, okay, that's it, or what have you. But how do I cite that? My grandmother came to me in a dream and said, your next book is gonna be about me. Right? Like, and so I think in a way of pushing disciplines and pushing academic notions and traditions, we are having to expand what counts as evidence, right? We have to expand what counts as knowledge. And that work has been done. I'm not, this work has been being done for decades, right? But this is why what I find fascinating, and this is why I've entered the way that I have. I've entered um Black studies the way that I have. Because I just I'm fascinating. I just think that we're so the worlds we build, the philosophies that we have, the ways in which we communicate and care for each other as Black women, I just, it's fascinating to me. And so everything I look at is through that lens. And it's funny. I was at a dinner, and this is because I'm making fun of myself. But I was at a dinner with an older scholar, and he was like, "Black women is you love Black women, Black women." And I was like, "Yep, sure do. Everything I do gonna be about Black women, and I ain't moving." So that's just what I love to do, and again, this is in honor of the women in my family.
Thank you.
Of course.
Um, it's something that in being I feel very honored and blessed to be able to have talked with as many Black women for the podcast as I have, and I'm always very excited to talk with Black women, and Black women scholars who are senior in the field, regardless of their age, right? Like, who have gotten the tenure, done the things, have um, the titles. One, because I'm just so thankful for the work that all of you have done so that I can too be in the academy and I can do these things and look at things a little bit differently, for expanding the disciplines in a way that allows for more inclusion of other Black women and for us to be able to continue this work.
Mhm.
But in speaking with Black women scholars, the way that so many are coming back to their families, particularly right now, like, I've been able to speak to several women who have recently published books where it's their family history is centered.
Yeah.
Women in their families, the things that they went through, the strategies, the fights, the battles that they had, they're putting that out there now, and I think that in this particular moment, having that type of knowledge is so helpful and important. Um,
Yeah.
and like you said, like, it's not everything, some things gotta be kept secret,
Yeah.
but it's so I don't say, the word is escaping me, but it's very fulfilling to be able to have these conversations as I think about, like, the women in my family.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important, right, to acknowledge the, disciplinary ancestors who came before us, right?
Mhm,
Who allowed us to do this sort of work, right? Your Audrey Lords, your Zora Neale Hurstons, your Alice Walkers. Alice Walker's In Search of My Mother's Gardens. That was In Search of My Mother's Gardens is key to me. And I was like, oh, I can talk about the women in my family. I can talk about their practices, what they were doing, and I can see the ways in which they theorize,
mm,
right? And so my thing has always been, and Christy Dotson talks about like epistemic violence and epistemic exclusion, and what Black women have experienced. Our ways of knowing has always been thought of as less than,
mhm.
and but we need to value the what we learned at our grandmother's kitchen table in similar ways that we value our PhD, right? And because those stories got us to the PhD,
Right,
right?
right.
That work got us to the PhD, right? Me learning and the story, my family's full of stories, right? That initiated and sustained my love of literature. So because I had the stories that I had from my family, then I could appreciate other folks' stories and get into other people's um lives and their families. And I find people fascinating in a way. I always say if I wouldn't have become a literary scholar, I'd become a sociologist, right? Just because I find people fascinating in all these different ways. I also think it's really weird. And Rashana Johnson, who's in history at University of Chicago, she's my cousin, and she just released a book. The name of it escapes me. And we're looking at our family from different parts of it, right? And I went to go see her talk. She's seen me talk, and we talk about our work. And she's a historian, and she's like, all the literary scholars are now in the archives, and all the historians are now in novels, right? Because our ideas of text and what counts as evidence and information has expanded so much in amazing ways. And I would like for future scholars to continue that work. Um, of redefining what counts as text, of redefining what counts as evidence, while knowing how to play the game, right? Because I tell my grad students, listen, you don't have to impress us by getting a tenure track job. That's great if you get it, but I am concerned with the practicalities. I'm a Taurus. I'm very practical. I'm like, can you pay your bills? Do you have health insurance? Great. Okay. That's a place we can start. And from there, we can get you to the things that you really want to do. But, you got to make sure your business is taken care of as well, because we don't want any, starving artists
Yeah.
or academics here, right? Your people didn't do what they did for you to live so difficult, so in such a difficult way because academia is collapsing as it's being known, right?
Yeah.
Know when to cut your losses, know when to find a different way to enter and to express and to do the work. And there are many different ways, and it doesn't have to be in academia. Because I see sort of my grad students and other generations and other future generations doing this work, and it's just being made much more difficult, right, in these political times, but also in these budgetary times, right? These budget cuts. Find your way to do it that's true to yourself, while simultaneously holding intention, the games you have to play in order to eat.
Yeah.
Because, think we ain't got a lot of us ain't got generational wealth, right? We ain't got it. So, and a lot of times we have to help out our family, and we have to
Yeah.
help out all of these things. Again, this is a part of being a Black woman and being so enmeshed in the community and those sorts of things, of recognizing also the vulnerabilities that we have, right? And one of those is economic.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that, and that you let your students know that because there are multiple ways to do the work, both within and outside academia. And I think, like, us graduating from Michigan State, right? Like, you go the goal is you get the R1 tenure track job. Like, that's not my story, and I'm okay with that. But it's what the expectation is,
Yeah.
right? And so it's the thing, it's that pressure you put on yourself, and then you do an alternative path and it works out. Like,
Mm.
I think that, like, I had my daughter during grad school. So, me going into a tenure track position
Mhm.
with an infant or a toddler is probably not gonna be the best thing in the world for me.
Mhm.
So, the fact that I got a non-tenure track position and that I have been blessed enough to have full-time positions everywhere that
Yeah.
I've
Yeah,
been, that has given me the flexibility to be there for everything that she needs,
absolutely.
have health insurance,
Mhm.
and pay the bills, and without the pressure of publishing this book or losing all of that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And so it's a less stable position in that regard, but it also has worked for me. So that's something that I think is really important for people to know, that if you don't get that R1 tenure track, you can still be in the academy, you can still do this work. It's just gonna
Mhm.
look different.
Yeah, my degree started off at a regional university, right? And that some things are gonna take time,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I also think if there is any lesson I want folks to learn from my career is it takes time.
Mhm.
And the people that I went through, grad school and stuff with who were, um, you know, early on touted as the stars or what have you, not all of them worked out. The majority of them, some of them did, right? Absolutely. But not all of them worked out, and that I had to go through a lot of rejections, applying for different programs and stuff like that, that other people, were getting, and dealing with my disappointment with that, but also, coming to a surety of my path is my path and what's for me is for me. And my whole thing is I did things in a more sort of traditional way, starting off at a regional university and writing my way up to a research one and things like that. So I did things in that traditional way, but that tradition doesn't fully exist anymore.
Yeah.
And I want folks to find their place and find a peace with their place, and also be okay with that may look different than the professors who taught you. And so in some ways it should. It should
Yeah.
look different. Things are changing. Um, I want people to find contentment. Not necessarily happiness. Happiness comes and goes, but a contentment with who they are and where they are. And I think that that should be the sort of North Star for folks coming out of programs right now, because if you have to live and die by the R1 tenure track position, it's not you know, and also, do you want it at that time? I think if I would have gone and gotten an R1 tenure track position, I would have flamed out. I also wouldn't have studied what I really wanted to study. My dissertation was on Black mother-daughter relationships in Afro-diasporic literatures, and, I would have, moved in that sorta classic way, but that I wouldn't have been happy, you know? By me going to this regional university, nobody paying attention to what I was doing, and they sort of one of the good things about, my previous university is they let me do whatever I want. And so, in a sense, they didn't care. Like, they
Yeah.
didn't take me seriously. So I was able to say, like, I want to explore this horror thing. I want to do this. And then even like when my book first came out, when Searching for Sycorax first came out, it didn't hit. It's only later in it, as people have, as horror has expanded, as, you know, these things have come into vogue that now my book has more of an impact. You're going to graduate and you're going to come into something that maybe isn't what you imagined. You're going to publish your book and it's not going to create the sensation you thought it was going to create. Things take time and you have to let things find their place and you have to let yourself find your place. And at the beginning, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be uncomfortable, all of these things. And you never want things to be uncomfortable to the point where they're detrimental. But um the tenure track ain't no joke either, right? We've seen people fall by the wayside. I actually had a mental health crisis while on the tenure track. Um, in some ways, unfortunately, because of the times that we live in, it's a sort of a pick your poison at times.
Mhm.
You're going to pay, is just how you pay, right? And are you comfortable enough, or can you go through the difficulty that whatever your decision is requires? And some of it's growing pains, right?
Yeah.
You're 20 something, early 30s or whatever, like you're still kind of figuring stuff out.
Very true. Like, the person
Yeah.
that I was 10 years ago is not at all the person that I am today.
Yeah. And we're academics, we're type A personalities often. We like things planned out. We like hoops and all of these things. And once you get your PhD, it's kind of like go with God.
Yeah,
Right?
I'll figure it out. Alright.
Especially if you don't have good mentors or people that want to see you succeed. I think that those things are much more important than any other thing you can do. It's your people, your
Yeah,
crew, who you create with, who you work with. Those are the things that is most important. I think one of the things that Issa Rae said that I found fascinating is she was like, you want to work upwards or hierarchically. Your instinct is to try to get on with people who are higher on the totem pole than you. Well, that's problematic. Who are higher in the hierarchy than you are. Um, but what you really want to do is to work horizontally, right? Who is on the same level with you, and what kind of collective can y'all get together and work with each other in order to move forward and move up as a group,
yeah,
right? That was incredibly helpful for me. I got in with John Jennings, Ronaldo Anderson, Robin Means Coleman has been wonderful to me. All of these, people who were working on sort of Afrofuturism, horror, all this stuff in these, in our own little silos, we came together and we started working with each other. And Okay, I have this added value. You give me something for this. Oh, I got this. You give me something for this. Oh, can you draw this for me? Can you do this? And with us working together, we were able to move forward. And all of us are doing very well now. But it was because we were sort of um outcast from other disciplines, right? Um, even like, I think horror has come into vogue now, but people were like, "What are you doing? Why are you study Black people? Why are you doing horror? Why are you doing this sort of work here?" And there was a lot of doubting, right? It's so it's so nice though because my dissertation director, she came around, she was like, "No, Kinitra, that horror thing actually worked out for you, right?" 'Cause she was like, "You gotta convince me a little bit more on this." I'm like, "No, it's gonna work. I got it. It's like, it can work out." But, um, but strategize about not only your career, but who you want to go along with. Who are your mentors? Who are your friends? Um, you can't do this alone. You can't do this alone. Um, who and I start off my new book and some of my essays and stuff with my great grandmother used to greet people by saying, "Hey, baby, who your people?" And I think I would recommend that people really look at who their people is,
Mhm.
who their people are. But I'm sorry, I'm getting real Black. But who are your people, right? Um, because that's what's going to carry you through. Because this is hard work. This is thankless work. Um, this is and it can be lonely, right? You're in the archives, you're sitting there reading, you're in front of your computer. Um, when I talk to my grad students, I am like, okay, before we get into your work, how are you? How are you mentally? How are you spiritually? Are you exercising? Are you doing what are these things that you are taking care of to take care of the person before we get into how's your dissertation chapter,
Mm.
right? Those are the things that we should care about, and those are the things you should care about for yourself. Even with the group of scholars that I work with, we're not always talking about this. We're talking about our families and, showing pictures of kids. And, those things are very important. You have to have community. You have to have community. Um, when I had my crisis, it was the community of older Black and brown women who were there and who held me until my parents came. You know, that's what's important. And academia is meant to isolate you, and Black people don't do well in isolation.
Yeah.
Insist on your community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that that's such an important reminder, particularly right now,
Mhm.
when there's so many overt attacks on people who do the Black work and are in Black studies and Black studies as a whole. Um, yeah, the dismantling of departments and pulling of funding and removal of people who were supposed to have stability through tenure.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's a lot, and you do have to have people to make
You
it
have to
through
have
that.
people. You have to have people. It's so necessary because it will not be perfume and roses all the time. And it shouldn't be, right? Um, we have life's ups and downs. And you know, you need people that are gonna protect you,
Yeah.
and help you protect yourself and let you know of things that you may not see coming down the pipeline, right? Um, your mentors are key,
Yeah.
absolutely key. And people should have like different types of mentors, right? Okay. this person has the career I want, but they may not have the personal life I want, right? I have rich auntie vibes. Some people, so, I've had grad students who like, I want to, get married and have kids, and I want to. So, who's your mentor as an academic who is able to make this life work, but who also has a partner who still seems to like them and kids who talk to them, right? All these
Yeah.
things, right? Um, you know, I am still incredibly close to my family, right? And those things I put that as a priority in my life. Everyone who knows me knows about my family. And so, you need systems and you need mentors. And people have made this work before, but we also have to keep in mind that this job is often actively trying to kill us, right? We lost a whole generation of Black feminists
Yeah.
um, from cancer. That means it's internal. Your body's turning against you. Um, we have to take care of ourselves and of each other.
Thank you. I do want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate everything that you share. So I'm gonna ask the last two questions as one,
Okay,
and then
good.
you can fold in because I really do want you to talk about the work that you're doing now. Um, so what excites you most about the past of Black studies? What excites you about the future of Black studies? And what are you working on?
Okay. What excites me about the past of Black studies, includes, the foremothers, the literary foremothers that were there, and the sort of grounding that I stand on, and the surety of, my ability to say, like, no, I'm going to study this. This is what I really want to do, and to believe in myself. But that comes from, previous generations believing in themselves and making a way for me to exist and me to do what I do. What excites me about the future of Black studies, um, is the energy of folks coming on the scene. The way folks are, um, there's this tension of where people are very sure of themselves and know these things, but also are open and willing to like talk and have conversations. And I think, um, you know, I just think young scholars just very much know who they are and very much know who they aren't, which is, I think, just as much of a key, right? And I see them and I don't always agree with them, but I like that I don't always agree with them, right? And I like how the energy they're bringing onto the scene and pushing us in ways that we need to be pushed, right? Absolutely. I love it. I love it. And I try to be there for people. People reach out to me. Um, and when I can do stuff. I used to be able to do a lot more in terms of it. I have my mentees now. But always working with the new people. The work that I'm working on now is conjure feminism and this idea of Black women's ways of knowing and of it being centered in ancestral reverence and veneration, of it being centered in root work,
Mhm.
and of how Black women have been doing this work for centuries. And that when Black women do things, suddenly they're not botanists, suddenly they're not philosophers, suddenly they're not religious scholars, right? Particularly Southern Black women. And I'm really going back to literally my roots of the Black South. And also the unique positionality of New Orleans and Louisiana, because I think a lot is known about enslavement in sort of the Anglo areas,
Yeah.
and enslavement in the Caribbean. I think um, there can be more work done in the unique positionality of Louisiana being not a part of the United States until the early 19th century, of being owned by the French, the Spanish, and then the French again. And it made for some fascinating but also very weird stuff going on. And I'm also fascinated. I've gotten to do the genealogy work and find some of my ancestors. I used to talk about Creole people in New Orleans, and then I realized that I am Creole on both sides of my I used to talk such stuff coming up in New Orleans about. I'm like, these Creole people, I don't understand. And then to find out that they're all over my family, um, was humbling. But no, I love my new work. I am working on my book, Divine Conjurers. The first chapter is about King Pavita. The second chapter is about enslaved women as root workers. The third chapter talks about the contemporary inheritances that we are getting from our previous conjure women. I also have a graphic novel about a Southern conjure woman coming out this year. It's called Red Dirt Witch, and it's an adaptation of N.K. Jemison's short story. I also was awarded a melon with some of my colleagues from Georgia Tech, including Susanna Morris and John Thornton. And I am working with the botanical garden, the Beale Botanical Garden here in Michigan State, and building a conjure garden. And we are in the process of, picking out the herbs and the roots that will occupy the garden. And we're having trouble finding High John the Conqueror. I'm like, what kind of world are we living in, to grow, right? And they're looking, but it's so fascinating to go back into the literal roots of root work, and to have the ability that this is going to be on campus and this will exist there, and this will exist so that Black students can see, you know, um, Detroit was a part of the Great Migration, and these are the things that the people, your ancestors come from, and these are those ways, and I find it fascinating. I just find it all fascinating. I hope y'all do too, but it's okay if you don't.
I find it extremely fascinating, and I am very much looking forward to being able to go back home and visit Beale Gardens and see the Conjure Garden. Like,
Yes.
I just think about, like, what that space might have been for me if I could have been there when that was available, and I think that that's gonna be just so affirming and helpful for so.
Yeah, we're going to have a conjure symposium the third year. Things have to grow. Like we're planning it this year. So the third year of the melon, we're going to have a one-day symposium on conjure, and I will send that information to you. Please be on the lookout for it. And we're going to do some presentations actually in the garden, right? We're going to be out there, um, in the dirt doing the work. Yeah.
Thank you. That'll be amazing. And thank you so, so much for your time today. I so enjoyed talking with you.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
And I know it's mid-semester, so things are a little hectic, but I hope that the rest of your semester goes well and that you're able to do the things you want over summer, 'cause too often there's no breaks. So I hope you do get to at least break some.
I'm going to stay home. I usually don't stay home. I'm going to stay home and enjoy a Michigan summer. I will go down to New Orleans and spend good time with my family in July, but and also in the heat. Jesus Lord, because New Orleans is hot. But I'm going to actually enjoy the Michigan summer, putter around my house, work on my garden, get my garden back to rights and all of those things. So yeah, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your semester as well.
Thank you so, so much.
Yeah, enjoy your summer.
Thank you.